Hi everyone, welcome back to the Movie Reviewers 100. My name is Scott, also known as Cineram here on YouTube. I do the Thursday reviews on this collab channel. There's sort of a semi-kind of break going on here, again. So instead of doing a theme, I thought I'd simply talk about a movie that got released in theaters recently, X-Men Apocalypse. Now, Bryan Singer is the director of this movie. There have been 8 X-Men movies released so far since 2000. He has directed half of them. He did the first 2, and he did the most recent 2, and he may end up doing the next one, but that remains to be seen. So, X-Men Apocalypse is, of course, a follow-up to the one that came out 2 years ago called Days of Future Past, which was also directed by Bryan Singer. And there's been sort of this 10-year gap between each film in the timeline of the movies themselves. The movies have come more frequently than that, obviously. But First Class was in 2011, and then we had, it took place in 1963. Days of Future Past took place in 73, 2 years ago, and now it's 1983. So we have lots of 80s references, I guess, although there wasn't nearly as many as I thought there'd be. A little bit of clothing, a little bit of music reference, that kind of thing. And Ali Sheedy, of course, very classic 80s actress, popping up in a small role as a school teacher. I was kind of hoping for a War Games reference, because War Games, in which she co-starred with Matthew Broderick, also came out in 1983, or maybe at least a Breakfast Club reference. As far as I could tell, there wasn't anything like that, unless the Letterman's jacket is worn by one of the students is actually identical to the one worn by Emilio Estevez in The Breakfast Club, but I kind of doubt it. I don't recall exactly, but I kind of doubt it. Anyway, that scene basically introduces Cyclops. Cyclops, of course, is Scott Summers, who is played by James Marsden in the original 3 X-Men movies, and now is being taken over by Tye Sheridan. He is going to be playing the main character, I think, in the new Spielberg film Ready Player One, which is an adaptation of a novel. That's beside the point. Anyway, Scott Summers discovers his powers in kind of a traumatic way, same way that Rogue did in the first X-Men movie, and, you know, Angel and other young kids who discover their powers. It's traumatic, you know, and they're sort of scared of themselves, and he's definitely scared of these rays that come out of his eyes. But his brother is Havoc, who was a character introduced in X-Men First Class, and he brings him to Xavier's school, where he meets, of course, Jean Grey, young Jean Grey, played by Sophie Turner, aka Sansa Stark from Game of Thrones, and begins to settle into the routine of dealing with his powers, as well as attending classes that are taught by Charles Xavier, played by James McAvoy, and the other, staff members of Xavier's school. In the meantime, Eric Lencher, played by James McAvoy, aka Magneto, has been living abroad and is living a quiet life. He, of course, has become infamous because of the incident at the end of Days of Future Past, where he was about to kill Richard Nixon, or somebody there at the White House, basically, but was stopped by Mystique. Played by Jennifer Lawrence, of course, who has been on the lam for a while as well, sort of hiding out. They've both been hiding out. Eric Lencher has a wife and a young daughter, but when he is discovered and they realize who he is, his wife and daughter are accidentally killed, and he flies into a rage and kills all the people around him and says, "Okay, I guess I'm Magneto the Killer, you know, so I'll do that, you know. I tried to be a normal, regular guy, live a good life, but apparently that's just not what God wants for me," or something like that. And it's because of this that he is discovered by the new character, the new villain introduced in this movie, Apocalypse, although they don't really ever call him that. They call him by his Egyptian name. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is a prologue that takes place about 3000 BC or something like that, where we see the Apocalypse character, who's a very, very powerful mutant, and has 4 bodyguards, what they call 4 horsemen, basically, who also have mutant superpowers, about to transfer his consciousness into a younger, fresher body so that he can keep living on and not die. That younger body, of course, is played by Oscar Isaac, who plays the character throughout the rest of the movie under heavy prosthetic makeup. But there are some other Egyptians there, guards, soldiers, who conspire to try and destroy Apocalypse by sealing him into the tomb that he's using, the pyramid tomb, which he's going to be transferring his powers. There's a whole battle scene in which they knock these huge square stones that they used to build the pyramids down these ramps in an effort to destroy the pillars that are holding the pyramid up from the inside. Meanwhile, the mutants on the inside are fighting off people and using their superpowers. It's a very exciting sequence, really liked it a lot. And then we have the title sequence where we're basically sped through history. We have this strange sort of tunnel that speeds us through all the major events between then and 1983, including Jesus and the locomotive train and Nazi Germany and stuff like that. Really, really cool sequence. And then once we're in the present day, we get caught up with our various main characters that we've been looking at and following for the last couple of movies. I should mention that at this point that Days of Future Past is a movie that's really well liked amongst the X-Men movie fans, except for me. I think that it's a really terrible movie. And one of the big reasons why I don't like it, not only because they set up time travel rules that they then break at every opportunity, but there's a scene at the end in which you see several of the main characters alive and well and happy and healthy in the year 2025 or something like that. This immediately takes away all suspense as to whether or not any of the characters will live through this movie because it's the 80s. So of course all the characters that we saw at the end of Days of Future Past alive and healthy and happy in 2025 are of course going to live through this movie. Yeah, kind of disappointing that they would do that, but they really felt they had to make up for all the hero characters that got killed in the Brett Ratner movie X-Men The Last Stand, so they really needed to just say, look, they're all alive at the end, everything's fine now, and it just, you know, it just makes further X-Men movies kind of pointless. So anyway, Moira McTaggart, who was played by Rose Byrne, and is again in this movie, is a CIA operative who's investigating a cult that worships mutants. And these particular people are worshipping Apocalypse, and when she goes to investigate, she accidentally triggers a chain reaction, which wakes him up after his slumber. He's been buried alive, basically, for thousands of years, and when he wakes up, he manages to teleport himself out of the mountain and into society again, and decides that it's time to cleanse the world once again of human beings. This really great scene where he meets Storm for the first time. Aurora Monroe. Storm was played by Halle Berry in the original X-Men movies. He says it's time for the world to be, and then he uses, in his language, the word cleansed. And she says, I'm sorry, what'd you say? And he amends that to say saved in her language, but it really means cleansed. Cleansed of all humans so that only the strongest mutants are left, basically. He's very particular about, you know, what kinds of people he wants around. Kind of like Malekith in Thor the Dark World. Pretty weak character, and in this case he's also pretty weak, because he just seems to want one thing, and that is only mutants to be around, no humans, no weak, you know, non-powered people, you know. They're the only people who deserve to live and everything like that, so that makes him, unfortunately, kind of one-dimensional. So, he meets Storm, he imbues her with additional augmented powers, you know, she's got weather-controlling powers, he augments her powers, and then he also meets Psylocke, played by Olivia Munn, and Angel, I don't know the name of the actor who plays him, but he was played by Ben Foster in X-Men The Last Stand, now he's played by a different actor. And of course, he detects the disturbance in the Force, if you will, of Magneto flying into a rage in Poland and killing all those guys after a family dies, so he seeks him out and imbues him with additional powers as well, or augments his magnetic powers, and the five of them basically are going to go around and do whatever they have to do to eradicate humanity from the world and save it just for the humans, and it's up to Xavier and the students at his school to stop them. So that's basically the plot of the movie. So there's a long period of them sort of gathering characters together, a lot of dialogue scenes, a few instances of people using their powers in action, and normally I'm all for favoring dialogue over action. It didn't used to be that way, but I find dialogue scenes a lot more compelling than just straight fighting or chasing or things blowing up and stuff like that. But unfortunately for this movie, it didn't seem to work quite as well. I was reminded actually of Spider-Man 3 while I watched this movie, because Spider-Man 3 is a movie which has lots of really dynamic, crazy, spectacular action sequences, but the dialogue scenes are just people standing around talking to each other with just very basic coverage, camera angles and what have you, and it sort of seemed like that in this movie as well. Not as bad as Spider-Man 3, but not really as exciting as it could have been, considering some of the other Singer movies that Singer has directed that are, you know, dialogue-based, or dialogue emphasized, I guess you could say. I'm thinking specifically of The Usual Suspects and Valkyrie, which are both movies that I like quite a lot, that are very dialogue heavy and contain minimal action. But yeah, they're compelling enough that they're still exciting. Whereas this movie just doesn't seem all that exciting. Maybe it's because the actors are tired of playing their roles. Maybe it's because Singer just isn't inspired the way he was when he made the first couple X-Men movies. I don't really know. But yeah, there are a few moments, standout moments that are really exciting or just striking. But when it comes down to it, really, you have people arguing about the sort of the same things they've always been arguing about, and then when they use their powers, it's basically them just sort of standing around and letting the effects guys do the work. I mean, when Cyclops does his thing, he's basically just standing there looking at something, and they add the beams in later. When Apocalypse uses his power, he goes like this. When Magneto uses his power to move metal objects, he goes like this. When Jean Grey moves things with her mind, she goes like this. It's just kind of the same thing over and over again. And then Charles, of course, always goes like this whenever he uses his mind power. It gets old after a while. Then there's Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence, of course, plays Raven, aka Mystique, again, and there's a couple of reasons why she doesn't want to spend a lot of time as her blue mutant, in her blue mutant appearance, but she basically just like Jennifer Lawrence in a denim jacket throughout most of the movie. There's 3 reasons for that. One, the movie gives us a reason that when she saved the President of the United States in the last movie from Magneto, her face got splashed all over magazines and newspapers and television. She became famous in her Mystique guise, so that's why she always looks like Jennifer Lawrence throughout this movie, is because she doesn't want people fangirling or fanboying about her, you know, saying, oh my gosh, you're the best, I love you, you're my hero. And she's like, I don't want to be a hero. The other 2 reasons are the behind-the-scenes reasons. Number 1, Jennifer Lawrence hates wearing all that makeup, and number 2, the Fox marketing people, the people that market these movies and produce them, want Jennifer Lawrence to look like Jennifer Lawrence as much as possible because she's a huge star and is a bigger star than pretty much anybody else in the entire movie. I'm surprised they don't give her top billing in this movie because she's such a big star now. You know, they still bill her third underneath McAvoy and Fassbender, which is, you know, appropriate. But yeah, her reasoning for not looking like Mystique throughout most of the movie is you know, there's a couple different reasons, but again, it's just you know, I really liked her a lot in the first movie. She had a lot of lighthearted moments, but it's just yeah, it's just kind of a thing where they all just, a lot of people who are in this movie have been in the last 3 movies, just sort of seem tired of it and would like to move on. But they're doing this movie probably because they're under contract or because, you know, they know it's going to make them huge bank, which is, you know, they're not terrible reasons, but they could be better. Anyway, so as far as the new people go, they didn't make a huge impression on me. I'm a fan of Game of Thrones, so I've seen Sophie Turner a lot in that show, and I don't know. I mean, she was fine. I can't say anything more really about her other than that she was fine. Same with a lot of the other actors in the movie. I like Tye Sheridan, I guess, but, you know, I mean, again, he didn't make that big of an impression. The screen time for all these characters is spread out so thin because there's so many of them. So it's unfortunately isn't like some of the best Marvel movies or what have you that have big ensemble casts. They just they don't. It doesn't. You know. I'm missing the right words. Anyway, it just didn't grab me the way that the previous X-Men movies went. Even Days of Future Past had a lot more compelling character moments in it than this one, despite the fact that this is generally a better movie, for me anyway, than Days of Future Past. I'm sure there are a lot of people who would disagree with me on that. I know that there's a lot of people that really don't like these movies, and in particular I'm thinking of another YouTuber named Comic Book Girl 19 who endlessly complains about the X-Men movies and how they're not like the comic books. But they're not going to be like the comic books. They've established a particular look and style beginning with the first movie, and they're continuing on with that, and people like her would probably just as soon they just wipe out the whole X-Men universe and start over with the characters being true to the way they were in the comics. In particular, they're talking about Quicksilver and how he's not really as fast as he is in the movies, and how he's sort of a jerk rather than a nice guy who's got a lot of good humor. And I'm just thinking, are you crazy? The Quicksilver scenes are the best scenes in the last 2 movies, particularly in this one. I really liked Evan Peters as Quicksilver. He has a lot of fun with the part. And from what I've read, he spends more time shooting his scenes in Apocalypse than any other actor, despite the fact he doesn't have as much screen time because his scenes take so long to do. He definitely has the standout scene in X-Men Apocalypse. I really like the Days of Future Past scene in which he saves Wolverine and Eric and Charles from, being shot. But in this one, there's an entire building blowing up, and he zips in and out over and over again within the span of about maybe 5 seconds. And saves a ton of people, all while having grand old time, smiling and messing with people, messing with their hair and what have you, and zipping them out one after the other. He saves a dog, he takes a drink from a can of soda, he guides a dart into the target. Meanwhile, the fire is, slowly moving its way through the thing. Because he moves so fast, his perceptions are really fast, so we're looking at everything from his point of view very, very, very slowly. And it's just great, it's spectacular. Plus, they use, an 80s appropriate tune during the sequence. It's really a lot of fun. If you're going to see the movie, I would say see it for that scene in particular because it's great. And there's a couple other good moments in the movie, like I mentioned. The opening scene, the scene where Fassbender's family dies. There's also a scene in which Apocalypse uses Charles and Cerebro to take over the minds of the people using, manning the nuclear weapon silos all over the world and causes them to launch them all at once. That's a really good scene, especially since they use a piece of Beethoven in that scene that I really like a lot. But the end is just basically a whole big CGI fest with everyone going like that, or just screaming, and then all the effects guys, they just add all the stuff in later, and it gets kind of dull, unfortunately. So I like this a little bit better than Days of Future Past, but that isn't saying much because I really hate Days of Future Past. It's a stupid movie. There's a whole bunch of really stupid things that happen in that. And whereas this one isn't as stupid, it's just kind of dull. So, sorry, not really a recommendation from me. If you can find the X-Men, if you can find the Quicksilver scene online, definitely watch it because it's a lot of fun. Or just, wait for the disc or whatever. But, yeah, I wish I could say that this was an improvement over the last one, but, yeah, not really. Another thing that Comic Book Girl 19 complained about was the fact that they're doing, or at least they hint at the, Dark Phoenix storyline for Jean Grey. As you recall in X-Men The Last Stand, Jean Grey basically killed some of the heroes and caused all kinds of destruction because she couldn't control the Dark Phoenix aspect of her personality. And Comic Girl 19, in her rant about this movie, was like, it's an outer space entity, okay? It's supposed to come from outer space. It's not actually within her. And they're just going to screw up Dark Phoenix all over again. I'm like, well, they did go back in time to save some people, but that doesn't fundamentally change who Jean Grey was. And if they do that, just as ignoring the character in the movie, whereas, some people just want it, they just want it just like the comic book and that's it. Which is not something that I'm especially for, because I'm not a fan of the comic books. If they were doing that with all the characters from the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show, then I would say, hey, why are you changing Willow and Xander and all those people? They're a certain way and you're changing them around, and please don't do that. But again, not being a fan of the comic books myself, not having read them, not being familiar with the characters outside the movie, I don't have that problem. So, that's my review of X-Men Apocalypse. For a few weeks, we're going to be sort of taking a break from the themes, I think. I'll be watching new movies and reviewing them, new movies in the theaters instead of older films based around a particular theme. But if you have any particular theme that you would like us to focus on as a channel, you can leave a comment on this video. You can leave a comment on our Facebook page. The link to that is below. Hope you enjoyed this, and please do subscribe if you haven't already, and we hope you enjoy all our future videos. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again real soon. I have been Scott, aka Cineram, here on the Movie Reviewers 100. Pow! Sorry, I won't do that again.